Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I will tell you why I was frustrated about the Fuji X100VI and why I sold it after 4 months and which camera I'm using now instead. When the Fuji X100VI came on the market, I felt immediately in love with this camera. The specs were really good. Finally, the 40 megapixel sensor of the X-T5 and 6K video recording. Then there was a high resolution display and a dual viewfinder that can display optical and digitally. But what I also liked the most was the extremely sexy retro look of the body. I mean, look at this, it's nearly perfect. Fuji is known for building cameras with a retro look and I always found them very appealing. At the end of the day, I didn't want to change my camera systems and the APS-C sensor also put me off. But with the new X100VI, Fuji has brought out a camera which is compact and perfect for street photography. In addition, there were all the film simulation with which I could experiment a lot and which immediately gave me a finished nostalgic look. But what happened now? Why I did sell the camera even though I was enthusiastic at the beginning, and which camera do I prefer to use now? That's what I'm going to tell you now. As I already said, I use the camera more as a second camera for street photography. Nevertheless, there were a few things that bothered me. First, probably the biggest reason, I couldn't swap the lenses. Of course, I knew this before. Nevertheless, I wouldn't have thought that the 35mm would limit me so much. Sure, 35mm is a sweet spot when it comes to a fixed focal length. But when using this camera, I often wished I had 20mm and I could get the whole building in the photo. On the other hand, objects were sometimes too far away and I would have liked to have them much closer. You can crop the image in post-processing or directly in the camera, but then you also lose megapixels and above all, you don't get the same look as with the telephoto lens. The next thing that bothered me was why I bought the camera also primarily for the 40 megapixel. During the day the pictures were really rich in detail and really sharp at an aperture of 5.6. However, as soon as the light got a little darker, there was a lot of noise in the photo. I was already used to a little noise in low light with my Sony APS-C cameras, but they usually had 24 megapixel. When you almost double the number of megapixel and put them on a small APS-C sensor, it is very susceptible to noise. Don't get me wrong, I was already aware of this before, but I didn't think it would be so noisy at the end of the day. If I compare the same image with a Sony a7 III 42 megapixel full frame camera with the same settings, you can see a big difference. Then there were a few smaller things that bothers me too, like the small battery or the limitation to record 6K video without a headphone jack. Finally, the autofocus also bothered me. It was good and much improved compared to the previous models, but as a Sony user, I was used to a much better autofocus and I always realized this when I was out shooting with the Fuji X100VI. Landscape and still objects were never a problem, but as soon as I wanted to photograph people or cars, the focus was often not accurate and I wasn't used to that with my Sony cameras. You can see which camera I am leaning towards now. At the end of the day, I wanted a small camera that has a nostalgic charm look and can be taken anywhere, but also does a good job when needed. That's why I ended up with the Sony a7C in silver. In terms of nostalgic retro look, I would always prefer the Fuji X100VI over the a7C. Nevertheless, the points that I've mentioned before made me decide in favor of the a7C. If you look at the two cameras in comparison, you can see that there is no much difference in terms of compactness. Both have a retro look, but the Sony has some advantages over the Fuji that I would like to point out. First of all, the biggest advantage, you can change lenses. Now the camera has a 28-70 kit lens on the body, which is even sharper than the 23mm lens on the X100VI. And I'm even more flexible when traveling. If I want to use the same focal length as the X100VI, I can simply take the Samyang 35mm and I've been even more compact. Viltrox has now brought out a new 28mm pancake lens, which is even smaller. I simply have the flexibility to say, today I want a 40mm and tomorrow I rather have 75mm. I don't have that flexibility on the Fuji X100VI. The next reason for the A7C was the great 24 megapixel full frame sensor. With this sensor you have a dynamic range that is incredible. In low light you have almost no noise on ISO up to 6400. The A7C has a maximum native ISO of 51200 compared to the X100VI, which only has 12800. That's 4 times as much. The larger sensor also gives you a better shallow depth of field. I didn't believe it before, but there is a very big difference between the two sensors of the X100VI and the A7C. Furthermore, the A7C has a larger battery with which you can take almost 300 more pictures and a fully articulated screen on top compared to the flip screen on the Fuji. As I already mentioned, the better autofocus also convinced me. The A7C has 270 more autofocus points and a faster processor that can track objects much better. Of course, the A7C isn't perfect either, and there are a few things that bothers me about it too, like the little viewfinder, and it doesn't look so good like the X100VI. But at the end of the day, the positive points of the A7C overweight the positive points of the X100VI, so I almost stopped using the Fuji camera and I sold it. Sometimes I ask myself if it was the right decision when I see pictures of the beautiful X100VI again, but then I remember the bad features and I'm fine with my decision. Please don't get me wrong, the Fuji X100VI is a good camera and many photographers have fun with it. Unfortunately, it didn't work for my needs, and you should have fun with the camera. But if you don't use it anymore, it's a shame to leave it in the cupboard and just look at it. I hope I was able to explain you why I made the decision, and I would be happy if you can write your opinions down in the comments. And if you like this video, I would be happy if you can leave a like and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.